Hi, I'm David Terrar and welcome to our live stream news and interview show Cloud Industry Forum presents TWF. I'm talking to you here in the mixed reality studio of Disruptive Live. I'm the CEO of Cloud Industry Forum, which is a not-for-profit membership-driven body that champions and helps accelerate the adoption of cloud technology and cloud services. We've got members like Lenovo and Acronis and Broadcom and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and OVH Cloud and Softworks and Wolters Kluwer. If you want to find out more about us, cloudindustryforum.org is the website. This show goes live on Mondays at 10 o'clock, and each week we start with some technology story that's sparked our interest, and then we interview a guest. Those guests might be one of our members explaining what they do, or it could be a book author or an industry expert. Today's guest falls into the category of a really cool and important product, but we'll get to that later. We're on the lookout for speakers to come and contribute to the show. So if you're doing something that supports or is supported by secure and trusted cloud technology, then we'd like to hear from you. You can connect with us in the comments here on LinkedIn. You can email us at info@cloudindustryforum.org. I'm at DT on X. I'm David_Terrar on Threads. I've got an unusual surname, Terrar, so I'm very easy to find on the web. What kind of caught my attention this week in the news is actually how poorly Google's 25th birthday was covered in the major news items that at least I saw. I mean, in general, they explained how Google's technology means that we've now got the whole world's data sources at our fingertips, and how the brand name has actually become a verb for searching, and other things like, you know, Google's grown into the powerhouse tech firm that does things like Maps and Gmail and YouTube and the like. But what didn't they say? Well, here's three things that I think they should have said. First, there were 20 or more search engines around on the internet before Google. So the success is definitely not anything to do with first mover advantage. Now, most of these are forgotten now, but here's some of the bigger kind of search engines that all lost out. Webcrawler, Lycos, Alta Vista, Excite, Yahoo is still around, but very different. Ask Jeeves, JumpStation. Now, some of those you might recognize, a lot of them you won't. Ask Jeeves was probably the simplest, but the rest of those search engines kind of grew into very complicated portals with top 10 lists and categories and options and submenus and stuff. And I'd actually kind of liken what Google did to what Apple did in the smartphone market. They came in after it had started, and then they took all that same functionality and packaged it better with a dramatically better user interface. Much simpler. So, I mean, Google's search page had a box for you to type in your question and then loads of white space. The second thing is, why did Google succeed? Well, all of these search engines figured out how to make money and take advertising spend from the big companies and the big brands, but it was Google who worked out how to make money from the long tail of the market, all those medium and small companies who want to have their products found. The Google algorithms and the focus on ranking and the marketplace approach to spend on ad keywords meant that they made money in ways that those other search engines didn't. The third thing is that Google was actually one of the ingredients in a profound change in the rules of business from the start of this century. There's a great book by Jeff Jarvis called What Would Google Do that it kind of explains it. But, I mean, customers and individual consumers are now in charge because they can be heard everywhere around the globe and their impact can be instantaneous. People can find each other anywhere and they can get organised, and they can get organised either for you or against you. The idea of mass markets is dead. We now have a mass of niche markets we can access. And I'm hoping some of you will recognise Clue Train Manifesto. If you don't, Google it. The seminal work, that seminal work started with the idea that markets are conversations. And that simple concept has changed both the game and the skills needed by marketeers everywhere. And the most successful organisations today are actually networks and platforms and communities. Now, I can actually remember quite vividly when the power of this change kind of first hit me. It was back in 2006, and my son was asking me over breakfast for some advice about a creative writing project he was doing at school that was all about doom and suicidal thoughts. And I referred him to a really amusing scene in the movie Annie Hall when Christopher Walken is explaining something like that to Woody Allen. And as I was speaking that to my son, I was actually typing that in to my smartphone, and before I'd finished the sentence, I'd found it, and I could hand him that segment of that scene on YouTube. And it suddenly hit me how different the world was because I could do that. So for the last 25 years, Google has been a key component in almost all of our lives, but I'm wondering whether AI and the rise of generative artificial intelligence is going to change that. Today's guest falls into the category of someone with a cool cloud-based product. Now, I'm a business apps guy at heart, and whether it's ERP or CRM or enterprise finance, the available products cover the standard stuff, but they don't cover all of the many kind of exceptions that happen in any business. Right? Too often, I see spreadsheets being used as a workaround for those process gaps, because it's easy to create a file in Excel, but then it can be really dangerous. And that recent PSNI data breach is a prime example of that, where somebody didn't realise that the spreadsheet contained all of the underlying data as well as the extract that they were trying to publish. But actually, there are all sorts of issues with storing data in spreadsheets anyway. So today's guest and his product aims to solve exactly that problem. So I'm delighted to introduce John Hayden at Ctrl. John, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hi, David. Good morning. Yes, I'm John Hayden. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Ctrl, and I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the business and really supporting our customers, making sure they're happy.
Excellent. Well, before we get into the product, can you explain a little bit about your background and how long you've been with Ctrl?
Yeah, I was thinking, assuming this question would come, and I was thinking about what to say, and really there's only a long answer, I'm afraid. My background is quite varied, really with a theme throughout of business IT applications or applying IT to support business. Going all the way back to when I was a young child, my dad was very interested in technology, new technology. So from a young age, I was playing with ZX81s, ZX Spectrums, before games came along. So I was coding and doing that kind of stuff very young. I went through school, went to university, did management science with computing. So although I was technical, I was more interested in the application of computers and how they could be used rather than actually coding them. Not only because it was also very difficult. So after that, I've worked for a small company, very similar to Ctrl actually, for payroll and HR. So it's a bit like a circle's complete for me some way. But I left that, joined the Navy. After I was chopped as aircrew in training, I ended up back in what the Navy has an engineering IS branch. And so which is where I met Andy, the CEO of Ctrl 20 odd years ago. But I've spent 12 years there working with IT systems, service management, helping design and develop capabilities for military use, particularly the Navy. A lot of it was back office type work, which then led to a career change when I moved to Atos as a project manager, working in cloud, early days. And then I ended up in business consultancy, and again it was about applying process and business processes and using computers, a lot of spreadsheets. And it was that time a few years ago, about 5-6 years ago, that I bumped into Andy again, and he introduced me to Linkspace, the tool he developed, and of course I immediately saw the benefit of that over spreadsheets. So my journey to Ctrl was well founded on a lot of the problems I've seen over the previous 20 years in business and the public sector particularly. And I immediately started working for Andy, doing some part-time work, which for me was great because it was back to technical, it was back to a bit of coding, and it was back to doing tangible fixes for customers, which was satisfying. And then, long story short, 3 years ago, I went full time, and happy ever since.
Excellent. Excellent. There's lots to talk about in there, but let's get on to the product. So the product's called Linkspace. What does it do?
Linkspace. So again, this is always a challenging one because it like a spreadsheet, it's really versatile. It can do all sorts of things. I mean, I would describe Linkspace, if I to try and put it into a single sentence, it's a business process standards compliance management tool, I would say. So it's like a spreadsheet, very versatile. It can be used for pretty endless range, I would say, of business processes of jobs, from tracking actions, case management, workflow, decision support, and so forth. And I actually use an acronym now, or try to, SPACE, quite often to convey some of the sort of benefits that try and tie together what it does that distinguishes it from a spreadsheet. And they are really that it's a secure tool, so it's assured and accredited for public sector use. It's a productivity tool as well, so we're focusing on outcomes and not the process itself. It's auditable, which is crucially important for a lot of the functions it's used for, in terms of complying with legislation and complying with access controls and all that kind of thing. It is a compliance tool, as I say, as well, collaborative compliance tool, which ensures that standards and policy are followed, and then that data is accessible and consistently reliable. And finally, it's evolving all the time. So we're providing what I would say is probably far more robust tool than a spreadsheet, but at the same time, the users have, and this was really one of the principles of Ctrl is to give the user control over the software that they use. So it can be adapted dynamically, so as circumstances change, as policies change from year to year, the users can update, add new values and that kind of thing. So, it's, I think, does that answer your question?
No, it does.
I could go on forever.
I mean, I've heard Andy talk about it as a kind of a low-code solution, but really, although that to a certain extent that's true, it does all of those other things. And obviously, what you're saying is the kind of things that I would jump into use an Excel spreadsheet for to create a database and produce some reports, and I can do that much more safely on Linkspace.
Yeah, you can. I mean, yes, I think low code's probably not strictly the right description, but what it allows you to do, I mean, in the same sense, if you were building a spreadsheet to support a process, you'd put your columns and you'd format cells, so you'd be defining how you want people to enter data into it. It's no different in Linkspace in that you establish data fields of the different types, text, drop-down lists, connections to other tables, and dates and fields, all of the standard fields that are captured on a web form. But you've got other facilities around access control, permission of read, write and create on those fields. So you can really ensure that your structure is robust so that when a user comes and starts to enter data, they're not able to edit it in the same way, you could reformat the spreadsheet, or you could delete columns and rows. So we're putting some structure and control around it so that it's more robust in an organisation where there are lots of users and lots of interactions with it.
So I can control the security down to just the bits that this particular person is allowed to change. Whereas with a spreadsheet, you've either got access to everything or not.
Exactly, or you're forced to control multiple spreadsheets to show people different, filtered sections of the data, and of course, we can control that as well in Linkspace. So it's not really low code. There's some interaction between I'd call them an administrative user of the system, the business process owner, for example, where they can determine what they want to do with it in a very granular way. Yeah.
Excellent. So, what kind of customers have you got, and can you give us a couple of examples of how they're using Linkspace?
Yeah, so naturally coming from the MoD, that was where the idea was born. So we have a customer there who use Linkspace as a
sorry, I can just say, when you say you mean the Ministry of Defence?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, yes, acronyms. Ministry of Defence. So we use it there along with the Foreign Commonwealth Office as well, to manage and plan and have an overall understanding of what's going on in the international defence engagement space. So there's funding available, and of course you can imagine with defence engagement, often it could be quite high profile, so there's potential for embarrassment, and there's the potential for, following legislation, the rules, complying with a checklist of activities that have to take place before you deploy to a country or people come to our country. So Linkspace has been configured there to replace, again, spreadsheets dotted all over the world. If you can imagine, we've got activity all over the place. And it allows defence to record or raise a request for an event, and then make sure that all of the actions and activities that need to take place to enable it to happen safely, and with the relevant approvals and permissions is done before then the finance can be tracked and managed for that event. And you can imagine with a spreadsheet there would have been 200 spreadsheets, and they'd have all varied, changed and evolved, but this way you've got one consistent central service. So our main customer really now is the Ministry of Justice. So we do a fair bit of work with the Ministry of Justice across a whole range of different tools, from case management through decision support. So probably our main customer there is the probation service, where we support sentencing of offenders, or not offenders at that stage, but we support the probation staff that are helping make the proposals that go to the court for sentencing, to support what the sentence is going to be. But it's about bringing compliance with legislation to make sure that the sentences and the programs after sentencing are complied with and consistent. And particularly in their case, it's about making sure that there's a reliable, consistent set of data that can be analysed over time. So you're checking for things like bias potentially around the country, and making sure that probation officers are doing a consistent job across the board. And the reason for Linkspace in that case is it's not, because I have to be careful to say here, it's not the system that's making the decisions. It's the system is allowing the probation staff access to a consistent set of reference data that allows them to then make the decisions and select the relevant sentencing and planning options for the individuals concerned.
Excellent. I mean, and this is what one of the reasons I was so keen to get you guys on the show, because I mean it's really good to hear of a cloud-based product that's trusted by the MoD and the Ministry of Justice. That's really cool. Now, here's something I know that our audience would be interested in, because obviously as a software, you're a classic software as a service provider, and you used to be a customer of UK Cloud for your infrastructure.
Yes.
And now that we know is a company that sadly failed and eventually went into receivership. So how did that affect your business? How did you choose and move to the new provider?
Naturally, it was disappointing and unfortunate for UK PLC, etc., but that's all been covered in the part to death so far, I think. I mean, for us as a business, as you'd expect, we provide assured, secure systems. So, we have backup procedures in place. We have business continuity processes and procedures in place. So, in terms of the impact on our customer, for example, it was almost invisible. The challenge for us, of course, was wasn't it going to happen, and it wasn't an overnight shutdown. Essentially, there was a lot of it was a lack of clarity. When was it going to happen? Was it definitely going to happen? So that really gave us a lot of time to put together a plan to replace it. So while unfortunate, and of course that took us time and effort and resource to get it done, we were able to go out and find another supplier and transition smoothly, which we did about, I guess, December-ish last year, I think.
Okay, that's a good story. Now, you've lived through that experience, and obviously we've heard how you've got some very security-conscious customers. How easy is it to get across how kind of safe and secure and trusted your kind of solution is in the cloud?
I think I have to say, because of the regime we've got in place, we naturally we're compliant with ISO 27001, which is a good framework for establishing a reliable and robust set of procedures and processes to make sure and demonstrate that we're compliant with all of these processes that we say we'll comply with. So sitting here today, it's fairly straightforward to do. I think you'd probably have to go back and ask Andy Beverley, the CEO, what it was like 10 years ago setting it up, because I suspect that was the challenging time to get that all in place. But I think we have a good rolling routine of keeping that up to date, keeping on top of it. And I think so because we're using companies we're comfortable with, that we know are secure and reliable. We know this because we're using UK SMEs as our cloud supplier, in line with our own principles anyway. It's relative. I suppose the easy answer is it's relatively easy to keep on top of that and to provide the confidence that we're doing a good job there.
Excellent, good to hear. So, tell me about the future. What's the things you can tell us about the product roadmap and what's next for Ctrl-O?
Well, I think we're still a small organisation, but we've still got the drive that we originally had, and the reason I joined the organisation. So, our objective 10 years ago, or Andy's particularly objective 10 years ago, which is now common parlance, was to have, give public sector users access to secure cloud software as a service. And our objective is to provide it, having experienced and been sat behind the desk as a junior officer in the military, trying to work with technology, trying to work with large service providers and proprietorial challenges around that. Our enthusiasm is to try and give people at what we consider at the time our level access to and control over how they use software to support them in their work. So we've been fortunate in our customer base to date that as a small organisation we can operate and provide that service. But what we're now aiming to do is to start growing the organisation. So recently we've taken on a couple of staff to give us the space to start looking at business growth, and give us so we're still aiming to, because we provide a very personal level of service to our customers, owing to the nature and the way our software works. We're able to do that, but the challenge there, of course, is then growing the business to support that as we grow, and give us then the freedom to go away and start looking at how to grow the business. And talking to you today, for example, is an example of how we're starting to look at growing our presence and exposing our brand so that people can see and hear who we are. But we are looking to expand in the public sector. There's no doubt about that. And we're also talking along the lines now potentially of the fact that our software was built to the demanding needs of the public sector, so that it's more than good enough for the needs of the private sector too. So. We've also redeveloped our software in the last 2 years. So we've developed a new front end to modernise it and give it a new solid base of capability to a platform, so that we can continue to develop new capabilities.
Excellent stuff. Now, lastly, if people are interested in finding out more, where do they? Obviously, tell us about the website. Tell us about how they can ask for more.
Yeah, so of course, our website is www.ctrlo.com. I should stress that O is the letter O, so it's Ctrl-O for open source, open and transparent service. And yes, or LinkedIn. They can find me personally, John Hayden, on LinkedIn with links to the company web LinkedIn profile as well.
That's been fantastic, John. I'm a big fan of your approach and what you do. Thanks for being on the show.
That's great. No, thanks, David. I really appreciate the opportunity to have my first interview live online.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was a great interview with John. We are, as I said earlier, looking for speakers to come on the show, so please make contact. Please put comments in the LinkedIn page here. Send us an email at info@cloudindustryforum.org. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope you see next week's show. Thanks very much.